Sometimes buying a car is a necessity. CarGurus contactless services can help. Safely find the best deals available when you search by private dealer appointments, at-home test drives, and contactless purchase. CarGurus, find a great deal safely.
Welcome, and thank you for joining us for today's Digital Airstrike Facebook Live interview. Ooh, we got a good one for you today. My name is Eliana Raggio. I'm going to be your moderator today, and we've been doing these Facebook Lives all year long, and all of our broadcasts have been great, but man, oh man, today's is very timely because today we have joining us Madison Gross. She's the Director of Consumer Insights at CarGurus, and she's a passionate marketing researcher with over 12 years in the automotive industry. She spent 8 years understanding vehicle shoppers and the car dealership business inside and out at CarMax before making the move to CarGurus a few years ago. But before that, she studied marketing and cognitive science at the University of Virginia and completed her MBA at IE Business School in Madrid, Spain. Ooh, exotic. She's here to talk to us about the results from the newly released CarGurus COVID-19 sentiment study, which came out just a few days ago, December 4th. And CarGurus is just making all kinds of headlines. You might have probably seen some headlines just earlier today. CarGurus is doing so much fantastic stuff. But this particular study that we're going to be talking about today is great because CarGurus, what they're doing is they're quantifying how the pandemic has impacted automotive consumer sentiment, which of course are all indicators as to how consumers want to be sold to, which cars or trucks they might select. Will they move up their purchase or delay it? Why? Would car shoppers purchase entirely online? Do they even like all the digital retailing and the process changes that dealers have been implementing all of this year? And what does car ownership look like in this COVID era? So many questions that are being answered by this consumer sentiment study. And we're happy that Madison, who's one of the researchers, she's here to tell us, because we know as well as you do that in order to sell, well, you first have to understand the wants, needs, and desires of your customers. So Madison Gross, how timely is it that you are here today? Thank you so much for joining us on this Facebook Live, especially so close to releasing the study. I feel like it's hot, new information. So I'm so excited you're here. Thank you so much.
So glad to be here. Thank you so much, Eliana, for having me.
Well, let's get right into it. We have a certain number of minutes to cover all the information that you've been able to garner through this most recent research. So I'm just going to play stupid for a second and just ask you first, where'd all this info come from? How did you get it? How recent is it? And why did CarGurus start this type of research on consumer sentiment?
Sure. So throughout the year, we've surveyed over 2,000 car shoppers on their sentiments towards car shopping during the pandemic. And our most recent iteration was in November. We released it, as you mentioned, it last week. So it's hot off the presses. We also did iterations in the spring and in the summer so we can benchmark sentiments over time, how they're shifting and how they're staying the same. People who responded to the study were either pandemic buyers, meaning they bought during the year between March and November when we ran the study, or they're current shoppers who are planning to buy this year or next. We do a number of studies on topics like the purchase journey, pickup trucks, electric vehicles, autonomy, and really just try and stay on top of the pulse of what's in shoppers' mindsets, both for us when we try and understand our own strategy at CarGurus, but also because we know it's really valuable information for our dealer customers. So this was just one example of kind of seeing what was going on in the world around us and wanting to get right in and learn more about it.
I love it. And yes, this is the third similar one that you've done this year. So upon reading, and I do have the research right here. There we go. Upon reading the research, I was surprised at the swing in a few of the sentiments, and we're going to get into that, from the first one that you did. I believe it was March. Was it March?
It was April. Yep.
It was April. Okay. So from the first one to now, seemingly not a lot of time has passed, but boy, oh boy, has a lot changed. So we're going to get into each of the different facets, if you wouldn't mind, of the study. First off, I did want to pick your brain a little bit about how hard was it to get this information out of consumers. They were readily available to give you this kind of insight into the way they shop and their sentiment, right? I mean, they weren't standoffish as sometimes car shoppers sometimes are, were they?
Well, in this type of context, they tend to be pretty open because we're really just asking about their feelings about what's going on. And I think everybody has a lot to say about this year. And so they have really strong opinions, are really eager to share them.
Okay, so let's start off with something that I know a lot of dealers would love to know about, because OEMs and dealers alike, they spend a great deal of time and money and advertising and research every year so that they can improve their brand loyalty. And so something that we're all wondering is, has COVID-19 actually affected brand loyalty when they go to actually make a purchase?
I think it's a great question. Our study shows that 62% of shoppers are considering more than one brand. So that's quite a lot of cross-brand consideration. And really one of the things that's driving them to do that right now are challenges with inventory and pressure that inventory is putting on pricing. We see that people feel like the great deals that they could find in the early pandemic are over by now. And that those who are shopping for a vehicle under $10,000 are even more concerned about being able to find something that they can afford. So when pricing and inventory are challenges, people open up a little bit. 62%, as I mentioned, are considering more than one brand. 42% are considering more than one type, meaning they might be cross-shopping between a sedan and a crossover, for example. And we also see shoppers increasing their likelihood to finance the purchase as another way to make it possible for them, even within current constraints.
Okay, you said so much stuff. I need to unpack every little tiny thing out of that. Okay, so 62% might jump brand. It's kind of normal. I mean, it's kind of high, a little bit higher than normal. Is that true?
We typically see that around 2/3 of people decide to switch brands. So when we look only at people who recently purchased and whether the car they bought was the same brand as the one before that, 2/3 of the time people are switching brands. But a lot of that is also driven by category switching. So, the brands that tend to sell the most sedans are not always the same brands who tend to sell the most pickup trucks, for example. And so that includes dynamics we see in the industry where pickup sales are rising and sedan sales are falling. And that's one of the things that causes people to switch brands. It's also, as I mentioned, one of the things that people are doing right now, like really considering different categories. Although sometimes I think people start off saying, I'm definitely going to get this category of car. I think it's a bit surprising that 42% are considering more than one.
Yeah, it was weird. My sister, she's not married. She has no kids. She doesn't even have a dog. And she has a crossover. And she said to me recently, at Thanksgiving actually, she said, I think my next car is going to be a pickup truck. I'm like, what? For why? Like, why? You're not a pickup truck kind of person. Totally surprised the heck out of me. And I'm wondering if a lot of people who thought they were going to get one and then decided to get another, for a friend of mine over at Microsoft, Chrissy Olson, they had a crossover, but her husband really wanted a truck. And with those great OEM offers that were early on in the pandemic, they wound up getting that truck that they had always wanted, never thinking that it was going to be in their price range. But here we are talking about, and come on, those OEM deals, they were amazing early on, but they couldn't last. We didn't have the inventory, and we still don't. So, yeah, the prices are higher now, both for new and for used. And affordability still is an issue. You know, at the beginning of NADA, I'm sorry, at the beginning of 2020, NADA had predicted, I think it was January, that affordability was going to be the number one issue facing car buyers. But then February came, and then COVID hit, and then the lockdowns happened, and then people were forced to stay home, and then people were laid off. And now we have this unstable economy, and a vast majority of Americans have economic uncertainty. So, talk about this affordability issue, um, and about how consumers are viewing financing and how that will impact their car buying decisions. Because it is, I mean, it's one thing to want a car, but how are you going to pay for it? And that is what the American consumer is facing right now. So, Madison, what did you find out in this study with regards to the sentiment on financing and how they're going to pay for the car?
Yeah, we actually see kind of a tale of two stories. One for early pandemic buyers who had access to more of these great deals and incentives and financing offers that you were just talking about. And another for those who bought later on or haven't bought yet. So those who bought early in the pandemic were nearly twice as likely to say that prices were lower than expected. Also, those who bought new had more favorable impressions of pricing than those who bought used. But looking forward, people assume that those great deals of the early pandemic are over. And, and so going forward, when it comes to affordability, a few things come into play. With financing in particular, we're seeing an increased interest in financing as a way to make the purchase possible. We also looked at whether incentive checks that people might have received are helping people to make a down payment. It's often the biggest barrier to being able to purchase. Some people feel like the monthly payment is doable, but the down payment is tough.
Did they use their stimulus checks for car purchases?
In particular, one of the categories that we've dug into is pickup trucks. We were just talking about pickup trucks. We all know that pickup truck sales surged this year, and it was really younger shoppers who were driving that surge more than older shoppers were. They were more likely to say that they were switching from a car to a truck, more likely to say that they were buying because they wanted to go on road trips or as a treat to themselves. So maybe that's what your sister has in mind.
No, it's crazy.
And they were also more likely to cite their stimulus checks as a reason for their purchase. So digging a little bit deep on that category, but I think it's true across categories as well.
So, is affordability still an issue? Still, I mean, they're talking about another round of stimulus checks, hopefully, coming out soon. And they're also talking about more lockdowns, possibly. So, what do consumers think of the economy and how it is currently affecting their decision to buy a car? Certainly, we want more cars to be sold, but we want happy car buyers as well.
Yeah, most people who decided to delay their purchases said that they did so because of uncertainty about their personal financial situation, about the health of the economy in general, about what their daily routines would look like, as working is different now than it used to be. Here I am
Right.
in my home office. um,
It's beautiful.
where kids are going to school is different than it used to be. We were uncertain about how safe it was to go out and shop in person. So uncertainty around the financial situation and around other aspects of our lives were really a lot of what was driving people to decide to delay their purchases. But I think on the bright side, 90% of people who had planned to buy this year before the pandemic either already have or plan to by the end of the year. So most people aren't putting off their purchases indefinitely. They just had to delay them a bit. And I think as we've gotten more used to things this year, and especially looking forward to 2021, I hope that a lot of this uncertainty will be resolved, and that'll make it easier for people to feel confident in the financial decisions that they're making. Because it's not just, can they afford the car today? They need to be thinking about, can they continue to afford those monthly payments over the course of the next several years?
Yeah, it's funny, the financing that people are being put into. Thank God the cars are being made better, because the financing is, I think the average is now like 72 months is the average. Lower interest rates, which is great, but for a much longer period of time. So we have cars that are lasting 9 to 11 years instead of, back when you and I both got into the auto industry, we had the cash for clunkers. We're going to get to that. But okay, again, you brought up a lot of great points. Let's talk about it. We're in a pandemic. So, of course, everyone is concerned about safety and staying healthy. And it didn't take long inside of the pandemic for dealers to hear that shoppers wanted to be safe. And they did a huge pivot. I mean, gosh, they've been doing pivoting all year, doing all kinds of new processes, and implementing new technology towards that digital retailing strategy. So let's get into this, because I think I already knew the answer before the study came out, but it's always nice to hear that the consumers liked it. But did they? Did consumers like digital retailing? What did they think of dealers adopting digital retailing? What is the consumer sentiment? Do they like buying online? Are there certain things that they love about it and things that can still be improved?
Yeah, so first of all, just like really want to commend dealers on their flexibility this year to
Yes.
find a way that works for them and their business and find a way that works for shoppers as well. I know a lot of people who wanted to shop local, support their local businesses, and dealerships were included in that. So when it comes to digital retailing, people's openness to the idea of buying a car online doubled from pre-pandemic, from around 30% to around 60%, and it's really kind of stayed steady since then. But there are some barriers. Some people would prefer to do parts of the process online or would prefer to use some contactless services rather than purchasing online. And in particular, test drive is a big barrier to buying completely online, with only 18% of people saying that they would be willing to forego that in-person test drive. And one great alternative in this environment are video walkarounds. Because people really want to have the confidence to buy. They are worried about making sure that the car that they buy is high quality, is reliable, that they won't feel buyer's remorse. It's one of the biggest challenges for car shoppers. And this is something that can help them get over that concern and be really confident and ready to buy. I think video reviews are another great resource for shoppers during the pandemic. You can find some great ones on YouTube from a few of my colleagues.
Now I'm going to stop you right there. I'm going to stop you right there because I don't want to look over this very, very important point that was in your study. And I think it is one of the most telling points of the study. It does have to do with digital retailing. You specifically asked consumers, quote, in your ideal purchase process, which of these steps would happen online instead of in person? Mm-hmm. And you gave them 5 options. And you had asked the same question. Now, this is the 3rd study of its kind. So you asked them this 3 times. And in this 3rd iteration of this study, for that particular question, 4 of those options, price negotiation, finance, trade-in valuation, and purchase, had huge upswings from when the same question was posed to consumers back in February or March, which in and of itself speaks volumes about the importance of digital retailing and that new customer journey that we're all still trying to learn. Mm-hmm. But the fifth one was test drives. Not so much with test drives. People really do still want to test drive. And although there is a video capability out there to show test drives, why is it that consumers won't let go of test drives, and how can video help compensate them for that?
Yeah, you can imagine that buying a car, most people aren't experts on cars. They don't buy a car that often. You just talked about how people are keeping their cars for longer and longer as the financing terms are also stretching longer. And so by the time it's time to buy a car, you might not even really be aware of what's out there, how much the technology has changed. And especially today, with so much of our new technology focused on safety, it's a really important thing when people are buying a car. And so they want to make sure that what they're buying is reliable and is safe. And I think that's the biggest reason that people really want to have that test drive. They feel like it's harder to tell with just a description and some photos. It's really nice to sit in the car and drive. Video is kind of a nice middle ground where, you're not personally sitting in the car and driving, but either you have a salesperson kind of showing you around all of the features just like they would in person, or you have an expert online who's driven tons and tons of cars, reviewed tons and tons of cars, who can give some really valuable information to shoppers. So it's something that really helps to bridge the gap between what used to be the kind of the only options for online, a few pictures and a description of the car,
Yeah.
and the much richer content that we can have today.
Yeah, the video we've been hearing from our friends over at Google and YouTube about how much video has changed the car shopping experience for people, how they love the video test drives and certainly those video reviews. And I gotta say, the video reviews CarGurus is putting out, they're pretty sweet. As a matter of fact, we put together a very short sampling of some video review samples. If you wouldn't mind, let's show that real fast.
Sounds great.
Hi folks, I'm Dave Underkoffler, editor of Autolist.com, a division of CarGurus. For many drivers, the Honda Civic has always been synonymous with learner's permits or first drives. But unlike other forms of cheap transportation, the Civic is no penalty box.
And that's the third thing about this car that's won me over. Get behind the squared off steering wheel and the view forward is remarkably good, nearly unobstructed by anything but the front fender peaks which help to frame the road ahead.
Welcome, especially next to newer cars like the Acura TLX and Volvo S60. So what do you think? Tell us in the comments and read the full review at CarGurus.com. Subscribe to that YouTube channel. We know you're going to watch some more reviews because we have a lot more coming. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
I'll pass along your compliment to my colleagues who I saw in those videos.
Really great stuff on there on CarGurus and of course shared through YouTube as well. We've heard research that it doesn't take a brainiac to figure out people would rather watch a video than read a lot of text. They love hearing from other people who are experts in the field about what they think of a particular car and how it drives. But even if they see somebody in a 22-minute video review a car and see the car, they still want to do their own test drive. What is it, validation for all the research that they've done? Yes, this is the car I want to drive for the next 7 years. Is that what it is?
I think it's also a feeling of how you fit, right? Like, have you ever sat in a car? And I personally have. When I was younger and I borrowed my dad's pickup truck to move some furniture. He had a manual transmission pickup truck, which luckily I know how to drive. But in order to get the clutch in and see over the steering wheel at the same time, I had to boost myself with blankets underneath and behind me.
Really?
It didn't quite adjust enough for me to be able to do both of those really critical things.
Yeah.
So, or if you're tall or if you're shorter than average, I think a lot of people want to kind of sit in it, see how it feels to them, and also get a feeling of it on the road. Drive it around on local roads, drive it around on a highway, see how it accelerates. And really, I think it's an exciting moment, right? If you're someone like me, you've had your car for a little while and you drive a newer car, you're like, wow, this thing is really smooth. So it's a moment where you kind of confirm all of the research that you've done. Because most people, by the time they go to a dealership, they only visit 2 or 3 dealerships on average before purchasing. They've really done a lot of the legwork online. But the test drive is a really nice final confirmation and a way to get excited about the new car that you're bringing into your life and thinking about all of the different ways that you're going to use it, all the experiences of your life that you'll have in it, looking ahead at the next several years.
Are they still visiting that many dealerships?
I don't know. We didn't ask that question.
Darn it.
We always cover that in our annual shopper journey study. We run that in the first quarter of the year. So we'll be running it again pretty soon. So we'll have a good trending data point for you there. And we'll cover a lot of the topics that we've covered in the COVID sentiment studies too.
I have to tell you, the buying a car, okay, arguably second largest purchase you're going to make next to a house, right? I don't think I'd buy a car without a test drive. I'm surprised that there are people out there who would, because like you get to feel, okay, so when I was dating my husband before we got married, I had leased a car. I fell in love with it. I leased it. Cool. Then I found out my husband couldn't exactly fit in my car. Like if he had to drive my car, which there were several times he had to wind up, his knee kept hitting the underside of the dashboard and he was just not comfortable in it. He's 6'1". He wasn't comfortable in it. So he could not wait for that lease to be over and for me to get rid of that car. Likewise, I had another car after that. We've had a lot of cars. We're car people. And it had a really crappy turning radius. I never thought to check the turning radius until I had already bought the car and I tried to park it and then get out of a parking space. It was not easy. And I spent another 3 years in a car that had a really crappy turning radius. Man, test drives, they're not dead. You still have to give a way for people to test drive those cars. And now one of those main pivoting things that the dealers did this year were those at-home test drives.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that you asked people about? Contactless things and at-home test drives. And did you ask them about that and did they like it?
We did. So overall, considering all the potential options for contactless services, 84% of shoppers said that they were interested in at least one of them, as you can see on the graphic here. 38% said that they were interested in doing a test drive at home. So that's another option, kind of a level up from all the video that we've been talking about, to allow people to test drive in a kind of in an environment that feels most safe and comfortable to them, but also gives the salesperson and the dealership a chance to show the customer all the things that you were just talking about. Let's try the turning radius. Let me show you how the features work. Because there's so much new technology that's really exciting for shoppers, but takes a little bit of getting used to. So I think it's a really great opportunity for salespeople to get people excited about the purchase and ready to go ahead and follow through, and work with customers in a way that feels comfortable to them right now, which they appreciate.
Now, it's not lost on me that the name of the study is the COVID-19 sentiment study. So I see that you did ask consumers also about how they felt safety-wise going into a dealership and what would make them feel safe. Can you talk a little bit about what consumers said with regards to, what does make them feel safe? And was it important for them to, I imagine it's important for people to feel safe. I'm just going to say it would be important to me. So, but what did make them feel safe?
Of course. So shoppers expect that dealers are taking precautionary measures just as they expect of every retailer they visit, whether it's the local Target or a grocery store. When we ask specifically about those measures, one of the interesting things we've seen over the course of these benchmarking studies is that consumer expectations have shifted a bit. So compared to prior studies, consumers are more interested in mask wearing on the part of both the employee at the dealership and the customer themselves. And other things, other precautions like constantly wiping down surfaces have become a little less important.
Really? That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah, consistently, we've seen that consumers expect dealers to be transparent about all of the things that they're doing. But just about everyone I know carries around a little thing of hand sanitizer and, constantly is
Oh
doing.
yeah, they're at every store, on every oh yeah.
So that's something that I think they can take a little bit more control over themselves, kind of make their own decision about it. Mask wearing is mutual. And so that's something that we've seen people expect more.
Fair enough. Okay. So back to safety, because
Mhm.
it's no surprise that before 2020, some of the biggest disruptors, and yeah, I'm going to give it the D word, the disruptor word. The biggest disruptors in the automotive industry were ride sharing companies. A lot of people, especially in inner cities, were foregoing car ownership because they're like, well, I don't want to buy a car. Then I have to find a parking space. I have to insure it. I mean, I spend most of my time in the city anyway. So they would just opt for an Uber or a Lyft. And that was taking a bit of a chunk, I believe, away from car sales. But then COVID hit. And now people don't want to get into strangers' cars. I'm with you, people. And, the initial research had showed that there are millions of new first time, new to the market car buyers, mainly because people don't want to do rideshare or public transportation, and I'm even hearing that there's kind of an exodus out of the city into the suburbs, and people are taking less travel and they're getting into. Let's talk a little bit about ride sharing. What did you learn specifically about ride sharing, and how that relates to consumer sentiment now that there's a pandemic?
Yeah, so I think this all ties back to what's really driving someone to make a purchase decision today. And there were two big drivers of that. The first one was an immediate need. And you have an immediate need when you used to travel differently, when you used to get from point A to point B on public transportation, using ride sharing services, using mass transit like flying. And so cars are really replacing those as an alternative for transportation. We saw that over 70% of people planning to travel this year say they intend to drive rather than fly, or that they've already done so. And that leads us into the second main reason, which is around people, really viewing their cars as an escape or just for some fun. Yeah, we've been cooped up at home for
Oh
so
my gosh, so much cooping up.
that, around a quarter of buyers who bought this year said that they wanted a vehicle for their personal travel or leisure or hobbies or projects. And as you said, in fact, it was 30% of pandemic buyers actually hadn't expected to buy this year before the pandemic. So on the one hand, we see
That's a big number.
it is. On the one hand, we see some people delaying their purchases, but we also see some purchases that wouldn't have otherwise happened if it weren't for the ways that people are changing their lives, in particular the way that they travel or get from point A to point B.
And do you think it's going to continue?
So looking forward, around half of people expect to use their car for more road trips or longer drives, even in the future, beyond just the behaviors that they've already shown. Um, 40% of people see their car as an escape or as a source of fun. Around a quarter of people expect to work from home more moving forward than they used to, even more permanently. I have a lot of friends who are saying, this isn't so bad. Like that, there's some great things about being in the office and working with folks in person, but for those who are lucky enough to have the ability to work from home, there's some benefits to that too. So I think some of those things will stick around, and and continue to cause people to drive rather than use other services. It was a third of previous rideshare users and 45% of previous public transportation users
Wow.
who expect to decrease or stop using those services going forward.
Wow. Okay. That's really big. Okay. Earlier on in the presentation, you had talked about there were people that were trying to find $10,000 and under cars. And that's a big chunk of cars. We hear from dealers that it's hard for them to keep in stock sometimes. We do have an inventory issue right now. But do you feel those people who hadn't expected to buy a car, were they buying new? Were they buying used? Was it just, hey, since I'm replacing my Uber usage with a car, yeah, let me just get a quick $10,000 car. I mean, what can you tell us a little bit about new versus used and that $10,000 mark?
Yeah, so to be clear, not a ton of data specifically on those $10,000 and under shoppers, but actually the data shows us that people are really wanting to treat themselves. As we've been holding back on other luxuries, you may have loved traveling and been unable to travel this year. You may have loved going to concerts and live events and been unable to do so this year. You may love eating out at restaurants and done that a lot less this year. So I think, first of all, there's ways that people are saving money that are allowing them to be able to make a vehicle purchase because they can save the money that they need to make a down payment. And second of all, there's this feeling that cars are a way to get away from it all, a way to safely have some fun, go somewhere local, maybe do something outdoors. And so, I think if anything, a lot of shoppers are considering maybe spending a little more than they otherwise would have because there's other parts of their lives where they can save a little bit and their car is something in their life that's really a treat.
I can tell you, I have saved a lot of money this year on entertainment expenses. Wow. So, yeah, no, it's funny. Do you feel that people view cars where they used to view it as, hey, I need to get from point A to point B? It's very utilitarian. Now, since they have a little bit of extra ducats in their pocket, maybe they want to treat themselves and they're like, you know what? That new Corvette C8 came out. That looks pretty sweet. You said they're treating themselves. Are they viewing car ownership differently than they had in 2019, let's say?
Absolutely. I think with commuting out and joyrides in, the role of vehicles in people's lives have really shifted. You see here that they are expecting to go on road trips or longer drives, that they see their car as an escape or for fun. And that's really a difference from most people using their cars primarily to commute. And on top of that, when we look at the next generation of car buyers, when we look at millennials and Gen Z even, they're also more likely to view cars as a part of their identity, as a way to express themselves. And so I think these things together, one, the impact that COVID has had on the way we view cars in our lives, and two, this new generation of car shoppers that has a particular love of cars will cause us to see in the wider marketplace just a resurgence of the American love affair with cars.
Did it ever really go away? I mean, but let's talk about a love affair, because I'm going to switch it up on you just a little bit, Madison. I'm going to throw a curveball at you because I know we're talking about this study here, but I also want to talk a little bit about this study here. That's right, the 2020 Pickup Truck Sentiment Study, which came out a few months ago. CarGurus put it out, and it was specifically about pickup trucks. And yeah, one of the bright spots in automotive sales, as you had said earlier this year, has been that amazing truck segment. Why? Because America, we love our trucks. I like big trucks, cannot lie. So let's talk trucks versus cars. Many were sold this year. Many were sold this year, despite the pandemic, despite the lockdowns, despite the economy and the inventory shortages. But why? Why do Americans love trucks so much? Was it the OEM financing offers that helped spur on those great truck sales? And is this truck buying trend going to continue? What is up with trucks? They haven't lost their love affair for trucks, that's for sure.
Yeah, so particularly this year, we saw that younger shoppers were really helping to fuel demand. But
Wait,
beyond
was it the younger shoppers? Are we talking millennials?
millennials and Gen Z, that same group of younger next generation car shoppers that we were just talking about, they were more likely to have switched from a car to a truck.
Really?
And more likely to say that they were buying a truck for road trips or as a treat to themselves. And I think this fits with a kind of a larger trend that we've seen in trucks where people have, maybe historically used them primarily for work purposes, but today are using them a lot for leisure or hobbies or road trips. And that is true even more so for younger truck buyers.
I did not know it was the younger car buyers. That is really interesting. Okay. Is there anything else you can tell us about millennials and Gen Z? Are they acting the same?
I think one other really interesting thing about this group is that they're more likely to buy eco-friendly across categories, but including within vehicles. And so younger shoppers are also leading the charge, forgive the pun.
Well, that was very, very smart, Madison. Yeah. I liked it.
I couldn't help myself, I can't do a single presentation.
Oh no, bring all the puns.
So yeah, younger shoppers are really leading the charge on electric vehicles. They're more likely, with trucks in particular, for example, to plan to own an electric truck in the next 5 or 10 years, more interested in brands like Tesla and Rivian and Hummer, who are offering electric trucks. And I think for them, it's really giving them the space to get a lot of fun and enjoyment out of the fun of a pickup and all the things that you can do with it.
It's still be nice to the environment.
Yeah, but without any guilt or bad feelings or environmental concern. It kind of lets them have the best of both worlds.
Yes, the millennials are very, very guilty. Okay, so I love that you mentioned Hummer, because one of the biggest news stories out of this past week, I mean, aside from all the big news stories CarGurus has had, the electric Hummer. The pre-order sold out in 10 minutes. What? Okay, so electric cars. You just said millennials and Gen Z. Those people are liking the changeover from combustible engines to electric. But with makers like Hummer and Lucid, is there a market for luxury electric vehicles? That car is over $120,000. Who is affording these?
So it's probably safe to say it's not like the 22-year-old millennial who is affording this, but actually younger and older millennials have some similarities, but also some differences. And older millennials are largely in their peak earning years. These are folks who are in their early 30s, for example. They've had a good decade, if they went to college afterwards, to kind of progress in their career. A lot of millennials are choosing to have children later in life. So those are folks who have higher incomes and maybe lower expenses also, and might have the ability to buy something like these luxury electric vehicles. You gotta love all the concepts here.
I mean, those are some crazy electric trucks right there. I feel like my husband is on like 3 different waiting lists. He's waiting to see which one's going to come out first. Okay, so let's, excuse me for the pun, shift gears a little bit. Oh yeah, it doesn't stop there. All right, so in reading your bio, I was happy to see that you and I, Madison, have something in common. We came into the auto industry right around the same time, and that was right at the tail end or so of 2008, right when the crash happened. Oof. But also right around the time of Cash for Clunkers. You remember Cash for Clunkers? Of course you do.
Sure
No,
do.
yes. So since you and I have both been in automotive since that time, back in 2008, 2009, totally never thought something like a Cash for Clunkers was ever going to happen. It was good for the industry at the time. But because of the pandemic, I'm curious, Madison, was there ever anything that happened in 2020 that just totally surprised you? Maybe you thought would never happen in the auto industry, or maybe was that something that happened that you thought, well, you know what, that it's about time that happened. Anything surprise you this year?
Yeah, well, so many things surprised me.
Right? This year has been crazy.
Was surprising this year, but I think some of the things that really stand out to me looking back are dealer resiliency. I feel like I've seen this time and time again, watching the industry work its way through the financial crisis and all of the impacts of that for years afterwards. With fewer cars manufactured, we're still feeling the effects of that financial crisis in the industry. But I think dealers were just exceptionally resilient this year. When I think about something where it's about time, I think I've been researching people being willing or interested in buying cars online for most of the last 10 years.
Oh, really? Okay, because we do our own study here at Digital Airstrike, and we've been asking that question in our yearly study as well. And we've seen that the sentiment go up. I'm curious to see what it looks like in our next study as well with regards to online buying a car completely online. Tell me, how surprised were you?
I've seen it creep up, certainly over time, but doubling openness and preference among consumers is just really exceptional. I mean, there's almost nothing that I've looked at trended over time in this industry where consumer sentiment changes that much that quickly.
Really?
So I think.
Were you happy about it though? I mean, don't you think it's about time?
I do. Yeah. I think really it offers consumers, or dealers can find ways to offer consumers options to buy a car the way that they feel most comfortable buying it. Maybe they do want to do the test drive in person, but maybe they can take care of their financing online in advance so that the in-person interaction is, like hand me the keys, sign the papers, drive off and go, like all the best parts.
Yes.
Car shopping are the ones that we get to like celebrate and enjoy together, where a lot of the work can be done online in a way that's really flexible for people. They can do it in the evenings after dinner, a time when it might not be very convenient to go to the dealership, but it's very convenient for them to be car shopping. Maybe they can do curbside pickup just like they would at their local retailer, where they do almost everything online and drive up to the dealership and get the car and go. So I think it will offer consumers a really flexible and enjoyable car shopping experience and be just like one further step of evolution, on top of consumers getting so much more information online compared to what they used to. It seems to me like the logical next step.
It's so funny because you stole my next question, which was, what can dealers do right now to help them ride out this pandemic? So it sounds to me like you're recommending really lean into digital retailing and reaching out to consumers through the internet and use technology to your advantage, because that is what consumers are looking for. Is that correct?
And offer the contactless services that work for them. We talked today about doing a test drive at home. We've talked about curbside pickup or maybe home delivery of vehicles. I think there's a lot of different options that can work. And in cases where dealers are finding themselves saying, like, is this worth it? This is a lot of work to do it. I think you have the flexibility to make case-by-case decisions. home drop off works really well for a shopper who doesn't have an easy way to get to the dealership. Maybe that's a sale you get that you didn't get otherwise. For a shopper who's happy to come in and pick up the keys, have them come in and pick up the keys, meet the person that they were working with this whole time, face to face, and get to celebrate it together. So I do think that dealers who can adapt to these changing consumer preferences, be creative about ways to do it, find ways to do it that work within their business model, will be the ones who stand out and come out of this better than they went into it.
Yeah, I don't think dealers really want to admit it, but I think before this year, dealers kind of dictated what the shopping experience was going to be like for consumers. And now they found out this year that the consumer is now dictating what they want their customer, their buying journey to be like. And if you're not going to give it to them, they're going to find somebody else who will give it to them. So yeah, I agree with your earlier sentiment, Madison. I've been saying it all year. Dealers have been so resilient and doing so much pivoting. I call it pivoting, just improvement on their consumer experience. It's just been amazing to see, and I'm so proud of our industry. Looking forward to seeing us get back on track with a 17 million SAR if we can. Okay, so I did want to hit on this because my next broadcast happens to be on December 17th, and it's with Anne Fleming. And if you don't know who she is, I think you do, though. She's the CEO of womendrivers.com. And I actually met her at a Women in Automotive event a few years ago. And she's going to be coming on and talking about how women really drive more than 80%, almost 85% of all household purchases, but especially when it comes to cars. And women actually buy more than 60% of new cars in the United States. And do dealerships actually know how to sell to women? Well, that's the trick. So I was curious, Madison, did you find out anything in your study, whether this one or previous ones, that specifically go towards how women view the automotive industry?
Sure. So we always look at, well, first of all, we always balance our studies to make sure that we're appropriately including men and women, people of different incomes. You get the idea, so that they are kind of valid and they make sense.
Yes.
One, I think you'd be surprised to see the number of metrics where men and women are not that different, even if you might think, I think men are this way and women are this way. But one thing that we saw where women did stand out here was that they were more likely to say that some things like online shopping and contactless services that we've all gotten used to over the course of this year will stick around permanently, that will not be a temporary change in the way that they shop and the way that they shop for cars. So I think we just had that discussion about the way that dealers can adapt and pivot, but understanding that women are really driving so many of the purchases, and that they're more likely to kind of think things have changed permanently. I think that maybe adds a little bit of extra oomph to the argument about dealers making the shifts in the way that they sell.
Those safety features, those online features that women can still get the information and still feel safe. Got it. Thank you so much for backing me up on that one, Madison. Okay, if you want to check out that final broadcast of the year for Digital Airstrike, you can always, of course, go to digitalairstrike.com/webinars. And we are coming up to the end of our time together, Madison, and I still have a few questions to ask you. So let's real fast. I want to make sure people understand where they can find these awesome studies. We mentioned the truck study. We mentioned not only this consumer sentiment study, but you had previous ones as well. And you have your other studies coming up too. So where can they find these studies? Where do you know where we can send people?
Absolutely. So we do these studies, as I mentioned, throughout the year. We watch what's going on around us and we respond to that and do studies on those things. So they're all available on the CarGurus Dealer Resource Center, as you can see here. The URL is dealercenter.cargurus.com. There's no charge to look at it. It's not exclusive to our customers. So we really encourage all dealers to check out the great content there. There's content, as I mentioned, from Insights team that I developed, but lots of other really smart and thoughtful contributors to it as well. So it's a really great resource. Encourage people to take a look.
Perfect. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. Okay, so we're sitting now on December 10th over here. You don't have any more studies coming out this year, right? But tell us again about that. What other studies do you foresee doing in 2021? What else can we look forward to from CarGurus?
Yep. So on the absolute plan is our shopper journey study for Q1. It's a really big study. We slice and dice it in a bunch of different ways. It's actually where we get a lot of the insights around shopping generations that you heard me talk about today. So we run that one in Q1. We'll update some of these COVID sentiments using that study. And we typically share some of the juiciest insights from it at our Navigate conference every year. So that's another way that you can access all of the content.
Is that virtual? Is that a virtual conference? Or?
It was virtual this year. It was in person the year before. So we'll see what happens next year. Hopefully we can all be together in person again. Beyond that, as I mentioned, we typically run studies on hot topics like electric vehicles, autonomy, pickup trucks and sedans. So keep your eye out. We watch what's going on around us and respond. So our goal is to always have really valuable and in-depth information on the questions that you're asking right now.
You are putting out some great information. Awesome stuff. Thank you, Madison. All right. Like I said, we're coming up to the end of our time, but I never let any of my presenters go without asking the same question. So here we go, Madison. What's the one thing you miss that you can't wait to get back to at the end of this damn pandemic?
Oh boy. I mean, there's so many.
I mean, honestly, I can't believe it's lasting this long. Yeah. I thought it was going to be over by June. I really underestimated this. And I know I've said it before. I said I miss concerts. So yeah. What do you miss?
For me, if you caught it early on, I spent some time living in Madrid, Spain. I have a lot of friends from that time who live abroad. This year, I missed a couple of weddings that happened abroad. Mm-hmm. So for me, just really looking forward to be able to reconnect with those folks and be there for their big life events.
Travel. Got it. Yeah. Travel, concerts. Please come back to us soon. I hear you, girl. Okay, Madison, thank you so much. You gave us so much great information. Audience, if you haven't yet checked out that great Dealer Center research page that we just showed you on the CarGurus website, or any of these fantastic researches that Madison and her team are doing over there at CarGurus, you should definitely do this. The information that they're putting out here is fantastic. Wonderful insights. CarGurus, you're doing a great job. Keep it up. Madison, you as well. And I believe, Madison, after this year, you have earned yourself a very nice holiday vacation, I hope. So I do wish you the best during this holiday season. And I'm hoping to reconnect with you next year with some of your newer data insights and strategies over there at CarGurus. I hope this won't be the last time you show up on one of my shows.
Thank you so much, Eliana. It was great to be here. Really fun having a conversation with you. So thanks to you and to Digital Airstrike.
Thank you so much, Madison. You guys keep up the great work over there at CarGurus. Now, audience, we wish you the very best over here at Digital Airstrike. Of course, I want to remind you, our last broadcast of the year, like I said earlier, is going to be next Thursday, 1 p.m. Eastern Time with Ann Fleming from womendrivers.com. To check out more on that, please go to digitalairstrike.com/webinars and sign up for that one. We'd love to see you there. But For right now, it's time to say goodbye. So, on behalf of Madison Gross and all the fine folks over at CarGurus, as well as all of my great coworkers over at Digital Airstrike, my name is Eliana Raggio, and I'm going to ask you to please stay safe, stay healthy, stay hopeful. Have a wonderful holiday tradition, whatever it might be. And we'll catch you soon on another Digital Airstrike broadcast. For now, we're just going to say goodbye and happy holidays. Take care, everyone.